So I'm Keith, and this is Nick, and today we're presenting Between Spaces Tensegrity Hammock. It's an interactive sculpture and play environment constructed collectively by the East Kensington community in Philadelphia. The system is designed to react to the presence of an individual, and it contracts an experience around the user, providing them with the tactile and sensory experience of the space. The goal of the project is to install a hammock in a local park where individuals can engage with the reflexive and reactive properties of the installation.
So the system consists of a continuous weft cord woven through a lateral tension warp member. The geometry affects occupation in the system by amplifying and suppressing movement. As the user applies weight to the surface of the system, the weft cord's length is pulled towards the user. This increases the space in the meat area, and conversely, weight applied to the system in one location will cause other locations in the system to contract.
Okay, so the main net is woven together using a double-braided polyester cord. The main support structure uses, so this is the woven surface here, the main support structure uses a 2-inch aluminum tube. Rope thimbles provide locations along the cord where they actually connect together, allowing for that freedom of movement between the one cord and the stability of the other cord. And some of our images are unfortunately disappearing, but these are some of the earlier prototypes that we went through with CNC milling and also some grasshopper scripting.
Our audience consists primarily of members of the East Kensington community, as both the audience and participants. And the potential for growth that this project offers in quality of life, we believe is palpable because in the 2010 U.S. Census for East Kensington found that 34.5% of failing households are below poverty level, and there's a 20% unemployment rate.
So the neighborhood initiative is ultimately that we can improve the green spaces in our local community by creating these interactive sculptures, but also by engaging the community and bringing them to the table to actually do the work, that we can also engage the community and stimulate activity. We're using materials that are soft and flexible and can actually be used by children and offer an opportunity for a space that is more welcoming or comforting to the individual. We're also working with neighborhood galleries to offer venues and participatory events where we can actually construct these or have the hammock on site where people can actually play with it and be a part of it and actually use it as a test subject for moving forward with the project. Currently we're working with the Friends of Haggard Street Playground to come up with a potential site, but we're also working with Frankfurt Avenue, the Arts in the same capacity.
So the final prototype that you sort of see the components here will cost us about $3,000. The previous images you saw were the plywood prototype. We're working with NextFab Studios right now and actually getting that built. They're donating fabricating services to us. We're building the full-scale mock-up, and we're actually going to have a test opportunity for people to come out and play and interact with our sculptural piece before we move on to the final prototype. Yes, so the images are a little bit light. Basically, what it's going through right now is the sort of flat-packed components that can be disassembled and then reassembled on site. Ultimately, moving forward with this, we want to make it even more collapsible and expandable and actually start bringing into the system more flexible components so that the entire thing can just be folded up, packed away, and then brought out for special events. So that's our project is. We'll just go through. These are some of the joint connections here. There are hard connections in the design currently, and that's just because the materials and the fabrication technologies that we're working with only allow us to do this sort of fabrication. Future, we do want to start prototyping either through 3D printing or CNC milling some more flexible joints. That's the final product.
I'll start. So how do you see this, I guess in the end, I'm trying to figure out one is I find it hard to believe that can be built with all the lightweight aluminum and all of that milling and all of the fabrication for $2,000. Since I've tried to build a lot of things, but it would be a feat for the final prototype out of all these materials kind of to be built like that. So I think that's it. I'm not quite convinced of that.
Right.
I think it's going to end up being like $5,000, but in the end, I'm trying to figure out. You kind of put out the consensus and the poverty and the low income and the I get the machine. I guess what it does, you kind of climb inside and relax, like a hammock, and it has this spinning and compaction. But I'm trying to figure out how that ties into all of the poverty-stricken, unemployed people in the neighborhood, and how you're alleviating that, how you're solving a problem here, because that's what this is really supposed to do, is solve a problem.
Right.
So you mentioned green space, activating green space. I guess I never saw it. I never saw it in motion. I never saw it in action.
Right.
I only saw like a ghost person inside of a white field. It needs to be in a park. It needs to have kids on it. It needs to have play wheels. It needs to be, have the Kensington guys in the corner. You need to have it in. If it had put it in Kensington, because it's a lot different place than anywhere else in the city.
Yeah.
So put it in Kensington, and see, because maybe you put it in Kensington, you're like, what's expected? So you have to put it in there if that's really what you're going to be pitching for us to do. Because I know Kensington, I'm having a hard time picturing where this would be or how it would actually work or who's going to use it.
Okay,
East
so
Kensington.
Yeah, East Kensington.
Sure.
Specifically.
East Kensington.
So we're both actually.
Yeah.
We've been in the community now for 3-4 years, and Haggard Street Playground has actually recently sort of adopted this project to work with them on creating a more tactile sensory experience space for children to play in Haggard Street Playground.
Is it just for kids?
No, not really. I mean, the whole idea is that it's there for anyone to be a part of. And really the way that, we're not saying that we're going to alleviate these problems, but what we're trying to do is instill community ownership. And by bringing people together to actually fabricate and build this thing on site, specifically with the weaving of the larger net, which is a pretty simple process, but we can get lots of hands on it, get lots of people involved, and throw events around actually fabricating. And then playing with this thing later is that this object becomes a part of the community through its involvement, through its production, and that's how we start to bring people together, create a dialogue, and open up these park spaces for future projects, for future
What's the
development.
net made out of again?
It's a double braided polyester cord, so it has like a 1/3 stretch, but it's really durable. It lasts a really long time outside.
So on the arts board, as a person from the arts board, how is it not going to be a place? It looks really comfortable to sleep in every night.
It's disassemblable.
Every day.
Yep. That's ultimately what we were saying about later. We want to actually make it so that
So
the
it's not a
entire
permanent-
system, so that it can be stored in a shed and then brought out for events, or stored overnight in Haggard Street
Okay,
and
so
then brought
it's
out
just
for children.
temporary.
Right.
It's temporary, but it's reusable.
Yeah, sure. But it's not a permanent fixture of Haggard Street Playground or where
Right.
it'll be
It's
there.
not a static object, it's a dynamic object that not only is physically reactive, but physically integrated into programming.
Okay. I love the IKEA like diagrams. It's very, very, very convincing. So it's Belmont did that.
Yeah, I would have to say that was the one part about, someone's gonna have to disassemble it, put it away every night, bring it out every day, or, on Saturdays, I do find that to be an issue, but at the same time, I thought right away someone's gonna love to sleep in there every night.
Yeah.
So you have to think about those realities as well. What you just said was a lot more convincing to me in terms of telling the story about how it's going to be used in the neighborhood and the park, and I think back to Chris's point about putting it in its context would really help. Another thing that might help if you were pitching to the Arts Commission or whoever is look at examples of success stories in the city. One that comes to mind right away is maybe the Village of Arts and Humanities, right north of Temple's campus, where, the community came together to make these gardens and it really helped the children in the community, and there's good case studies out there all around Philly to kind of help make your point that if the garden is better, if the park is better, if the things, people feel that ownership, and having everybody come and weave the net, that is that's the sales pitch right there.
Okay.
Or the Caterpillar?
Mhm.
That was a project that was up on Frankfurt Avenue, where it was this kind of collapsible box that was in these 1 foot or 18-inch segments, this big frame, and it spread apart and became like a mini amphitheater. And it was right on the field at South Frankfurt, New York, by Liberty Cycle there. It was at
Where the
Interface
giant
Studios,
dice and the pink tank were?
What's that?
The giant dice and the pink tank? Same.
Maybe, yeah, probably. I know it was there a while ago. It was out there for a while, and you could collapse it and kind of lock it up.
Awesome.
And then you slide it apart, and then it becomes a little stage at the end, and then all the frames become little seats. And they put on shows when they have First Fridays and things like that. So it's in Fishtown, it's right there. It's just a little example of something that was somewhat successful. And,
Awesome.
and it was interesting to see it now because it's just kind of falling apart. So there's
Yeah.
maintenance, but it's built out of plywood. So
Uh-huh.
that's a whole different story than what we're talking about here, but there's that kind of ongoing maintenance of us giving you the money, getting our money with is in 6 months, is this thing gonna be, and that's all the time, plugged up and with this and once something breaks, this next fab ready to give you the part,
Good.
that's the, next fab is awesome, so
Yeah.
definitely
It's
continue.
been
Pushing
super
it down.
beneficial for the project, so.
I have little kids, and so we started off, and I spent all my time playing playgrounds. That's all I did. So I'm like, all right. Besides that, and so I'm like, I'm so excited to see the kids having fun, and let's see what sort of stuff they're doing. And I didn't get that, so I think that speaks to your point earlier. Adding some renderings in and showing some of that fun element. I mean, I think that's sort of the idea, that there's fun to be had here. So to add some fun to
Right.
either the presentation, the images, or your commentary would be helpful. And then just one other thought was that the $3,000 isn't much, and yet it sounds like you're trying to engage a lot of different community members to participate. Maybe there's a bigger idea in here where you're creating some sort of a community-oriented business where people are actually getting paid to help put these things together. So then you're addressing maybe some of the employment issues that you referenced earlier. And obviously this is a prototype, but maybe you're seeding this story with down the road, that's where this thing could go. Might add a little bit more context, and I think that's when you start to engage philanthropy at a much higher level than then you're getting to the tens of thousands of dollars, where they may actually be more excited about that than a $3,000 grant.
Right.
One potential sort of feature that we talked to actually the Friends of Haggard Street Playground was to use it as a sensory sort of
Yeah, they have this long-term plan to actually do a full-scale sensory garden that engages children with autism and sort of high sensory experiences. So they actually want to push us to actually further develop the project to take those things into consideration as well.
And as much as I can appreciate Next Fab and what they're doing, they're probably, they're fairly disconnected with what's going on in Kensington as far as in East Kensington and Fishtown, as far as the kind of fabrication community up there.
Mm-hmm.
Next Fab is like light years,
Yeah,
so
like sculpture.
it'd be interesting because I understand where the kind of prototype's heading, but think about that hand-woven, that hand-welded type of frame. That there's a ton of welders up there, and there's a ton of people who can weave up there, and it's like that's community engagement. And coming up with maybe a kind of, not to say just a less sophisticated maybe version of something that's like can still function and work, that can actually, I think there's a great point about it actually growing and becoming a seed of something bigger, because the prototype is this beautiful aluminum, amazing machine, but it can be a lot of different things. It could be built out of wood, it can be built out of mild steel, it can be welded, it can the wielding things could be burlap, it could be all kinds of crazy stuff. It's just a beginning of something else. So you show your piece and then maybe think about how it could actually evolve once the community says, this is great, I want one. And then it's not maybe the same exact seed everywhere, it starts to evolve and change with each community and what they are best at. Up there, there's a lot of welders and stuff like that.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.